Welcome back. Let's Get Physical Therapy is an educational podcast brought to you by MedStar Health and hosted by me, physical therapist Becca Schumer. I will be sharing the mic with tons of healthcare professionals with the goal of educating and inspiring fellow PTs and future PTs. We hope you find this both informative and inspirational, ultimately optimizing how we treat our patients and grow as professionals. Please enjoy today's episode. Joining us today is physical therapist Steve Luca. Now, this bio does not do him justice, so we'll let him tell a story in a few minutes, but let me tell you a little bit about him first. He attended the University of Maryland College Park, where he received his bachelor's degree in kinesiological sciences, and also completed his master's degree in PT from Old Dominion. He's a certified athletic trainer and specializes in a whole lot of things like injury screenings, BFR, dry needling, treating the spine, but especially treating the overhead athletes and baseball players. He's very passionate about it, and we're really lucky to have him today. Steve Luca, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. How are you?
All right, Rebecca. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, we kicked this off with kind of just like to hear your PT journey. How did you get into becoming a physical therapist, athletic trainer? How did you get into it?
I played baseball in high school and football. Of course, kept getting hurt like everybody. So kind of knew I wanted to go into the health field because, you go into therapy clinics and you see how they work and the trainers, and I like that. So, I went to college to play baseball, of course, got hurt. So I ended up in the training room and then spent the summer with John Lopez, who used to be at the old Baltimore Colts trainer in Towson Sports Medicine. And then he got me in contact with J.J. Bush, who was Hall of Fame trainer from Maryland, where I was going to school. And I actually was a student athletic trainer for 4 years after that, which was the best experience I could have ever gotten. Like seeing, over 4,000 on field hours, because Maryland wasn't a curriculum program. It was more of an internship program. So then after I went through Maryland, I did football and lacrosse. Actually, I didn't do baseball. I did football, lacrosse, and then I also had your lap cheerleading, who got hurt more than anybody, and track. So it was a great experience for me. Then I went to therapy school, Old Dominion. And then one of my internships was actually helping with the rehab of the Lynchburg Red Sox. It was their high A team. So that kind of got me back into the baseball. And then when I came back after therapy school, I started at Union Memorial Sports Medicine. Dr. Howard and Neil McDonald had started that. And we were on the second floor. And it was awesome because I was with Dr. Matthews and Dr. O'Donnell, and Coco Eaton, who's now was with the Devil Rays. And so it was a great experience. Then I left Union in 1996. I'm getting old. And then
You did that to yourself. You did it yourself.
I know. We didn't. And then I went to where I got my break. As far as I worked with some great therapists at Union. They're incredible. But when I got to Philadelphia to run Phil Donnelly's physical therapy clinics, that's when my career as a PT, I think, just took off, because I was working with incredible therapists, and I got a chance to work with Phil Donnelly, who is and I'm biased, but he's light years ahead of all of us as far as therapy and rehab and anatomy, and he's just a genius. So he's still 80, he's 86, and he's still treating throwers at this, on the weekend. So and that's where I really took off as a therapist. I felt like it was more like an internship up there. Like I was just running his clinics, and we were doing all the Phillies therapy, and part of a huge research project, which we'll go over, where we did 3,000 pro players. And so that's really, and then it's evolved over time. I came back to Baltimore, and then eventually got back with MedStar in 2005. So, and I've been back since.
Yeah, we talked offline before we got onto this just about the importance of like jumping full throttle into something, into say, a particular area in PT like you did with baseball? Like, sounds like you were just a sponge trying to soak it all in and take advantage of all the opportunities in front of you.
I funny thing is when I came out and I was at Union, I felt like I had a good background on sports. I mean, I had a ton of ACLs, ton of shoulders, ankles, hip, but I told them to flood me with spine. I wanted to just screw up and then learn, and I feel bad for the people I may have screwed up, but I feel like, I mean, I know I've evolved into, shoulders and throwing and stuff, but I always my spine also really helps me with treatment throwers. So, um, yeah, I think you gotta wanna, throw yourself in there and try to, I mean, there wasn't a day I didn't ask Phil Donnelly 4 or 5 questions at least, because even if I knew the answer, I just wanted to pick his brain on, like, what's he think like, and I always thought I knew. I'd go home and read. I'd come back and he would just shoot me right down. It was just it kept me like energized to keep learning. So I just think, if you really want to be good at something, you really just got to have that drive to want to put the time in. So with all the young therapists, and I see some, and there's some, some people, they have it's a lot going on. They just put their time in. They're good therapists and good, but there's some that just have that drive that just wanna get better. And I always had that when I was, especially, I still do now, but when I was younger, I really had it, and I was lucky. I was blessed. How many people get a chance to work all these years with Phil Donnelly? So, I mean, I was fortunate.
Let's get into baseball players. What kind of
Sure.
injuries are you seeing, and how do you treat these athletes in your clinic?
Okay, so they're coming in early and earlier. They're coming in at 10 and 11 now. We never used to see that. I just think, the advent of these showcase teams and trying to impress schools and stuff like that, and being able to throw as hard as you can. I think that's and fall ball. Like when I played, I think fall ball started by senior year in high school. So we didn't play fall ball. Like we went to another sport. So I think the advent of fall ball, and then winter training. Like these guys don't get a break. So I think that's why you're seeing a lot of people break down. And these injuries, it's like someone will come in and they had been working out, and it's not something that just came on over the last 2 months. This is something that's been building. So I think if you don't do the right stuff in the off season, um, that's when things start to happen for you. So it may not, you may have pitched a lot like in 2019, right? But it may not hit you to 2021. So um, I just think that's why the screen that we do is important. But I'll be honest, Becca, most parents don't appreciate the screen until their son gets hurt or their daughter gets hurt. So then they're like, wow, why didn't we, so that's why we always try to push it, and offer it. But um, a lot of people, they just want to keep playing, playing, playing. They don't want you to shut them down or something like that. But I think the more we push for these younger kids to get screened, and so then they can go and address whatever we find that could cause some injuries is important. So and MedStar's been proactive in that. We've done a lot of screens for youth groups and stuff like that, and hopefully that'll continue. As we keep get out of this COVID era that we've been in. So
Yeah, we need to be less reactive and more proactive.
exactly. Yep. There you go.
Yep. So tell me about this screen. What does that entail?
Okay. So basically, someone will come in, fill out a questionnaire. It's got like 25 questions, and it's like, how many innings did you throw last year? How many innings did you throw the year before? What are your main pitches you throw? Stuff like that. So we can look at the screen, the questionnaire before they come in, and we have an idea of what they might have, or their history, and then we'll just do a total body screen. We look at their posture, then we'll measure their core strength, their lower extremity strength, and their upper extremity strength, and then we'll look at their kinematics of their scapula. That's huge because I'm a Donnelly guy, so everything is based off the scapula for us, and in just treating normal, everyday people, people that are painting or hammering or something over it, it helps in that. But you have to look at the scapula, and then um, do a lot of functional screen, because the lower half is so important. I think a lot of people forget about that. And then from that, then we can assess, like, just give you an example, like someone who only has 105 degrees of hip flexion on their landing leg. Well, they're not someone that's going to be able to get forward, their chest forward and over a bent knee when they release, right? They're always going to lock, spin off, which is what we don't want. So, or someone that doesn't have enough internal rotation on their landing leg, they can't stay closed long enough, so they're going to open up too soon. So the screen kind of gives us hints to what their mechanics will look like. And really what I love to do now is what I realized years ago was I wasn't doing them justice by not looking at their mechanics and fixing it. Like, again, I'm blessed. I trained with Phil Donnelly for almost, 25, 30 years now. So I can look at the mechanics, break it down, and rebuild their motion. And I really think that's important. I think it really is the big thing. I think mechanics, you can be weak and, but guys that are strong, like you look at major MLB guys, some of them have just the worst mechanics, but they're strong, they're flexible, and those are guys that can, withstand that, and, that get lucky and don't get hurt. But, most people, everyday kids, their mechanics, when they get tired and tight, mechanics become an issue. So I just felt it was a disservice if I didn't correct that. And, some guys we rebuild their whole motion, and some guys we don't have to change one thing because then that corrects like three things. So, but it's fun. But I think as therapists that really want to treat throwers, it's important to really address that and get them out of those things that are probably causing their injuries. So that's what the screen does. We look at everything physically, and then we look at their biomechanics, and then we put a program together. So, but the screen's important. I can't stress it enough, and I applaud MedStar has been very proactive, and especially before COVID, we were always out there at high schools and doing them at events for kids, and they were, it was very beneficial for the public. So
I'm going to kind of ask you some questions about this screen, but when you're looking at the subjective part, when they're filling it out beforehand, what are some red flags, or like what are some flags that go up when you're reading this and you see what they're
okay,
writing?
so innings, how many teams they're on, the pain before, I had pain. So I had pain in my elbow, took a break, went back, stuff. Anything like, kind of, I had pain. Innings is what kind of pitches they're throwing because of their age, so those are the things I really look at, that I focus in on. So, I mean, if they came in and I've only thrown 10 innings, so I'm not going to think it's a big overuse, unless another good thing is if they pitch and catch. That's like the worst thing that you could possibly do, because they're pitching and then they go and catch the second game with a doubleheader, so they're just setting themselves up to really get hurt. But those are things on the actual, like, the questionnaire that we give them before. That's what we're looking for. Or did you have a history of any injuries like before? So stuff that's the main things I look for.
We're going to have Tom Sutton on, who's going to kind of take the lower quadrant. So with
Yeah,
the screen, what kind of tests are you doing aside from manual muscle testing, the upper extremity, and what kind of core strengthening are you looking for? What kind of tests are you doing?
sure. So for the screen, we always, we have them all take their shirt off, and you've got to be able to look at their scapula, right? So everything is based off of that, because if you have a forward head, rounded shoulders, that's going to inhibit, your rhomboid, your serrate, so you really have to to, is their pec too tight, because that's huge on a thrower. So is their levator too tight, upper trap? So you got to look at the static, and then you have to look at the scapula through movement. So we'll put the scapula in a bunch of different positions and see, does it tilt? Does it abduct? Does it depress? And that gives us an idea of what's tight. And then a huge thing is obviously, have them do shoulder flexion bilaterally, and we'll have them do multiple times to see if the serratus is firing, because that's huge for a thrower. And then we'll have them do abduction all the way, and then we'll see if the lower trap's firing, if the coupling mechanism for upward rotation or downward. So it gives us an idea, And I had a boy come in the other day, just raised his arms up and got a long thoracic pulse, his scapula almost, came flying out. So you have to take their shirt off, and you've got to look at the static and the dynamic. And then that's what we look for outside of the strengthening. I think it's huge. You have to look at that. When I was younger, I'll be out, I first did before I did, but I didn't, I didn't stress it. I was stressing rotator cuff and, what I'm saying, and retractors, and I was missing the boat. I really was. What I do now is totally different than what I did when I was younger. So it wasn't what I did was wrong, but it wasn't ideal for a thrower. So everything now I do is functional, like protraction with flexion, hip flex, retraction with extension, everything is functional. Every exercise we give them is functional on one leg for core, so, and core is huge. Like if we don't have a strong core, we don't even address their shoulder. The big test that I use was developed in South Africa in the 1990s, was with rugby players. It's called the Lino method, but the big part of that one is called bunkies, and they're really like planks on steroids. You put them in these multiple positions, and if you can do 30 to 60 seconds in each position without shaking and without like wavering, then that's a pass. And then the incidence of lower extremity injuries with rugby players on a 10-year study was, 99%, that it decreased the incidence of ACLs, ankles, hip problems. So we use those with every screen. I think they're important. Then I use them as a strengthening. And then we use it like one-legged squat to see if the knee buckles or the hip drops. One-legged squat is that weakness in the abductors. So that's important for a thrower's, like their landing leg always buckles, their knee buckles. Then you got to strengthen their hip abductors. And then I think another one we forget about is we do like a standing squat test all the way down, because you need 20 degrees of dorsiflexion as a pitcher to launch over a bent knee when you're releasing. So if you don't have that, then those guys they lock and spin off. So we make sure that they're dorsiflexion. But those are the simple kind of basic functional ones that I know Tom will go over a bunch of other stuff, but that's the basic ones that I use.
We know that baseball inherently is an asymmetric sport. You're throwing with one arm, rotating more commonly one direction versus the other. So how much are you trying to optimize symmetry in the athlete, and what is doing them a disservice by, say, overstretching a particular motion versus not the other?
Yeah, that's why we do every exercise both ways. Like a med ball slam or a water bag, or we make them do it in their true motion, and we make them go on the other side and throw like a lefty or throw like a righty. So we try to make it as symmetrical as we can. We do every exercise on both sides, and I feel that it helps, because you're right. A lot of guys come in and they're so one-sided, right? So we try to balance it out. And that's a great question, because a lot of people just work on the side, but the program that I use, it's all designed on both sides. So we make them do every exercise. Like we have a pitcher's lunge, when we make them do it like a lefty, if you're a righty, and we make them do it as a righty, as a left, so cross training on both sides. So that's a great question, because a lot of people forget about that. But everything that we've designed as an exercise program is designed for both sides. So we try to get it as close, there's going to be a little bit, more to the dominant, but we try to even it out as much as we can.
Range of motion deficits, left versus right, in the throwing arm versus the non-throwing arm, and total arc of motion. How do you work with that?
Okay, so this is where I'm fortunate. I was part of a 11-year study with the Phillies and a few other teams that we only looked at. We looked at 2,500 professional pitchers and 500 professional catchers. So over 11-year span. And the problem is the research has never been published because it's owned by the Phillies. But what we found was if you had greater than 20% GERD on your throwing side, that the chance of you having shoulder pain and elbow pain before or after was 100%. So it's pretty accurate. So I know.
Can you tell us what GERD is?
It's basically a glenohumeral internal rotational deficit. So basically internal rotation deficit. So with a thrower, that's huge, right? Or with anybody doing overhead, swimmer, volleyball, guy painting. So I look on it, even any older woman that comes in, like we work on that. That's important for the glenohumeral joint, to move properly. So what we're trying to do is 80% of those guys or people that come in with the GERD, it's going to be able to be corrected by stretching, and then 20% are people that say someone's been pitching for a long time. So the capsular is going to be scarred down tighter. So those are people that may need, the doc to go in there and loosen, cauterize that. I mean, but 80% of these people can be corrected by stretching. So, and it's huge. It's huge, and everything is, like I said, mostly with the throwers, scapula, GERD, and then of course we look at everything else. But if you're going to be a new therapist trying to, you really need to look at the scapula because 18 muscles attached to the scapula. Right? So you have to get that under control so there's not a reverse function of certain muscles. You need that. And then, you have to get that deficit of internal rotation. You got to get rid of that because if it doesn't, then your humerus will ride up and you get chromium. And these are guys that are going to have to drop down and get in a slot that we don't want them in. Right. So it's really important. And I know there's been some studies that came out and said, "Oh, GERD's not important," but I've been doing it for a long time now, and that study was as thorough and as accurate as because it was a Phil Donnelly, Jeff Cooper, and if anybody knows those two NATA Hall of Fame guys, it was that study had no flaws. So I just feel that. It's important. It's not everything, right? Just because you have GERD doesn't mean you're going to hurt you know what I'm saying? But I've never seen someone to come in that I've treated since 96 that had a shoulder problem or an elbow problem from a thrower that didn't have GERD. I still haven't seen one. So I think it's important. I think that people that say it isn't, I don't, everybody's got their opinions and I always respect people's opinions. I feel it's important and, I address it. So
what's been the evolution of how you treat throwers from good old sleeper stretch? How's that kind of changed throughout the years that you've been practicing and how you address these deficits?
This is great because Dr. McCambridge and I did a talk at the National Athletic Trainers Convention years ago. And it's when dry needling was just coming out. And I remember my slide, it said, the wave of the future is dry needling. And dry needling has changed everything. So let's take someone coming in. So they come in and, most people come in and fail the screen. I've rarely had anyone come in and pass the screen. And usually they've been people that maybe that were there with us before, right? So they knew the exercises or something like that. So say they have a GERD of 43%. So years ago, we would just, okay, let's do the sleeper stretch. Let's give you some other stretch, the horizontal adduction stretch. Now I just go in and I dry needle the infraspinatus and the teres, and their GERD is gone immediately. It's changed everything. And strengthening. So someone comes in and has 4- with serratus and 4- with external rotation, which is common with throwers. So I go into the neck and I dry needle from C5 to T1, the multifidus, and I run electric current through. And then once I take the needles out, they're equal to the other side. They're back to 5- at least.
How long does that last for?
Oh, we fire the muscle right away, and then that lasts. And then we can take them to another level as far as strengthening. But I think that's huge. So years ago, when we were doing rehab on the throwers, we would put them on the rack, traction, because cervical rotation and tightness is huge for velocity. So if you don't have that rotation ipsilateral and contralateral with your cervical spine, it affects your internal and external rotation strength. So we always knew that back in the day, but now I can change that dramatically with the needles. So I get their motion back, and that's huge for me. I didn't talk about that screen, but looking at cervical rotation and addressing that so I can maximize, their velocity. Like we have a program at the end that's outside of the therapy. That's like a total throwing program. It's med balls, weighted balls, which we can talk about stuff, but you have to have that cervical rotation. I think therapists, don't treat it, like don't really look at that, but that's huge, like for internal and external rotation strength. So dry needling has changed everything. So, and even someone who's got let's say a hip abductor weakness on their landing leg or on their push-off leg, I just go in and add, needle L5 S1, and right away they're back to 5 out of 5 on their strength when I manual muscle test it. So dry needling's changed everything. It's made things a lot easier, and then I can get them as strong as they've ever been, and healthier and motion, and it's just it's sped up the process. I mean, we always used to get there, but I don't think we ever got to the point that we get these guys strong now that we do now with the dry needling. So, and BFR, we do a lot of BFR, so the needling after the BFR is just a gold mine.
I guess physical therapists, we don't think enough about the nerves and how they control the muscles. So if you're asking an athlete to just activate a muscle that they have that is not possible given restrictions or that neurological signal not being sent to that muscle, using that dry needling to kind of reboot that system and get those messages firing again is crucial. Otherwise, you're just working, things are adaptively shortened and you're not going to get anywhere.
Exactly. That's why we always knew there was a neurological component, but the needling has really helped us like address it. So just a quick one, like serratus anterior, there's branches 5, 6, 7, T1, right? So that's why we go in and hit all those levels with the multifidus. So, and that really helps us get that serratus firing again. If they have like a long thoracic pulse, I'll go into the serratus, I put them on their side and come into the serratus, and then I'll put the needles on and stim it, and I'll do even a Russian in that position. So I use needles with current. I mean, I love current. I trained under Donnelly again, and who wrote 4 modality books. So I just think that with swelling, like in the spine, we'll put high volt through the needles, and it just flushes it right out. Like it just changed everything. So I think for young therapists, if they can handle put needles in people, I think that's like a great tool to have with anybody you treat. Headaches, I think it's really important.
I think one of the most interesting game changer things I learned in my dry needling course was the importance of changing the position of the neck and how that affects the patient's ability to fire those muscles, because we don't operate in neutral. So that's kind of what you've been talking about regarding like the rotational aspect and where the pitcher's arm is in that motion, and if in that particular piece of the motion their head is flexed or rotated, and then that nerve's not getting sent, the signal's not getting sent, then it's going to affect their strength in that range. Versus like if they were just straightforward, maybe it'd be normal.
Exactly. Exactly. And we took the course together.
As we did, that's right. I think
So,
I avoided your table. I was a little worried about how you're
yeah,
going to shoot those needles.
I'm a little aggressive with this. As long as you know where you're at, you can do. So, I just think you're right. It's huge, especially like, you always hear like when you're in your mechanics and you always want their head inside their landing leg, right? Inside the knee. So most of these guys, their head is way outside. So that's compressing, right? What we want to be free. So, and it puts them all in a biomechanical disadvantage that people don't realize, So I look at it a little differently, like, I look at it in, I want their head to be straight so they're in a better arm slot, but I'm also looking at strength and firing of things, and it affects how we do weighted balls and stuff like that as far as rehab. I mean, that's huge now and in the throwing circles. But yeah, I just think like we talked about, it's looking at people in certain positions and then addressing those symmetry problems, and then you can work on the other stuff. But I think a lot of people really don't look at that. So yeah, it's important.
I was going to kind of ask you about these weighted balls. You've brought them up a few times. What is the significance or the benefit of using weighted balls?
All right, so there's programs everywhere now. Driveline out in the West Coast, that's a lot of pros go to, and there's programs everywhere. But I find that weighted balls are really important in kind of reestablishing proper mechanics. So we don't use them to gain velocity. We use them to retrain muscles on how to throw properly, because muscle memory is huge, and when you're trying to get someone out of a pattern, you really need to get that. And my favorite, I know you asked me what my favorite quote is, but
wait, you can't do that till the end. Don't.
Oh my God! Well, I'll get to that.
Don't spoil it.
I won't spoil it. But so we definitely I use the heavier balls, 32 ounce. I put them on a Bosu ball, one knee, and we're just working on. We want the proper deceleration pattern or proper pattern looping up. And you're not going to get high velocities on those heavier balls. So the amount of injury that when you're just doing it to reestablish a motor pattern, you're not going to affect it. I find that when kids go do weighted ball programs, if they have horrible mechanics, they're going to get hurt. I can't tell you how many people come in that I started this weighted ball program and I got hurt, right? And okay, I got screened, right? The parents, they screen them, but their screen isn't like what you and I would do. So it's different than a therapist doing it. So I find that the weighted balls, when you have improper mechanics and you're weak and tight, the chance of you getting hurt skyrockets. So do I feel weighted balls have a benefit? Yeah. I mean, if you have good mechanics, you're strong, and you have someone watching you when you're doing those drills, to make sure you're not in an improper slot or something, I think they can be beneficial. You're not really gaining velocity from the weighted balls, right? What you really gain is you gain more external rotation, which in some cases can be very detrimental, right? And then you're gaining the velocity from that extra external rotation, because your internal rotation is what generates that velocity, that strength. So I don't feel the weighted ball increase arm speed or increase strength, right? They really increase external rotation, which now when you're coming through, if you're stronger internally, and that's what we'll concentrate on for someone who wants more velocity. And I know Tom's going to talk about the lower half, but how that all works through, that's when you gain it. So I think people think weighted balls are just making them stronger, and I don't. The research doesn't show that. So, but it does show you getting hurt, and it does show you gaining more external rotation, right? Which is, it's important for a thrower to have proper external rotation. You don't want more than 120. because then you're starting to be a little hypermobile. We don't really want that.
Hmm.
But the weighted balls, using them to retrain their movement pattern when they break the glove, because that's where the breakdown really starts. Once they break the glove, things go haywire. So that's what I use the weighted balls for.
How about long toss? Where does long toss come in?
Oh, long tosses. If you ask any guy, there's younger guys that don't, but long toss is huge. It's you need to develop like baseball strength, right? So you could be strong as an ox and throw your bullpens, but you need that baseball endurance and strength. And long toss helps you work on your mechanics and helps you develop some distance, internal strength. So I think long toss is huge. And if you interview a lot of MLB guys, they'll tell you, they love long toss. So I know their articles came out like long toss, forget about it. But guys that play long toss is huge. And guys that really treat that, they see how the benefit is on mechanics and developing um, proper arm slots, and it's got a lot of benefits. But it's long toss is great for developing baseball strength. So I think it's important.
I know you mentioned a couple of studies that are the opposite of what you've seen in clinic. And I think that's just a good point to bring up, that we don't have to live and die by what is in the research, that anecdotally and through experience, we learn so much too. So you kind of need a mix of the two.
Exactly.
Right.
I think it's a mix. I mean, it's great to have those research, and then someone else needs to follow it up and do more. So if you can learn one thing, it's like you go to a course. I've been out a long time, but if I go to a course and I learn a couple things, I'm happy. So you take everything. There's a lot of brilliant people out there, so, and I try to read as much as I can every week. I print new articles just to see what's going on. I know you do. I love that about you. So try, I could pick up something. I always pick up something, and then I'll get, it makes sense, or no, it doesn't. But then I'll try it to click, just to see. But I think that's the best thing about our profession, is people always, but there's nothing, you can't trade experience, right? So, and I know some things I've read, it just didn't seem to work for me. Maybe I was doing it wrong, but I kind of look back at the basics. Spine, that experience I had with spine for years, it really helps me address, muscle imbalances, everything mechanical. I just think it's not cookbook, and that's why some articles, may work for one player, but two other ones it may not. That's why the more you see it, the more you can adjust and stuff like that.
Whole picture into account. Can't just look at one particular joint.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. That's it's a total body screen. That's why our screen is head to toe. It's 150 things on that. So on our big screen. So I just think you can't leave any stone unturned. Because something can affect something. Especially when you're dealing with a high level, or even a 12-year-old. I mean, they don't buy in as much, but it's important to address those imbalances so they can have fun and play, and who knows where they're going to end up. So they want to have fun, and I want them to have fun, not be hurt like I was when I was younger, because we didn't really know what we were doing back then when I was playing. So I just feel it's important now.
We could talk baseball all day long. You're one of the most humble people I know, and I've learned so much from you. So thank you
Thank
so much for sharing all this with the world.
Oh, no problem. It's been fun. Yeah.
Now it's time for you to share your favorite quotes. We like to end with, what is your favorite quote that drives you, moves you, motivates you?
For throwers, and right, the feel is the deal. If they can't feel it, then they can't correct it. So, I mean, and all the people that work with me always hear like, "Can you feel that?" No. Well, we're going to keep doing it till you feel it. So until they feel it, they can't correct it, because I can't follow them home, or I can't go to their practice. I mean, they all send me videos all day long. Like I make them video and send it back to me, but until they can feel it, I with even with the exercises, right? Like be able to retract and depressed, like until they can feel it, we really can't get them to where we want them to go to. So that's mine. And for the parents, it's if you can throw, they'll find you eventually, because everybody's always in a rush, and just a great story. We had a boy, and I treated him since he was in 8th grade, and had a lot of talent, just wasn't clicking. He couldn't feel it, right? And then his dad was just stressed. He he loves his son so much, wanted him to have those opportunities to play, and the kid wanted to play. And then his senior year, it finally clicked. One of the biggest schools on the West Coast saw him and, gave him a scholar, so, it doesn't matter. You need to get healthy first and don't rush it. I have more fun just getting somebody, just wanted to make it their high school team, what I'm saying? But it's fun to watch kids. We're fortunate. We've had 27 kids drafted out of our clinic. A few now are in the majors, and it's fun, and they keep in touch. And but I'm just as happy for the kid that just wanted to play on his rec team or make his high school team. It's want people to have fun with it, and if I can help them, stay healthy and then see where it goes for them, that's what it's about. So just with normal patients, how it is. You just helping them be able to function and be out of pain is what we got into it for. So, it's fun. Treating these guys is fun. So I just put the time in, work with a pitching, go watch a pitching coach that kind of knows what they're doing, and, learn what they're teaching them, and just keep watching videos. It's important, but don't forget the basics like we talked about. Like, this conversation's been great because, you got to address the spine. You got to address the static. You can't have people that are their shoulders are so rounded and their head so forward, everything shuts off in the back, and everything's tight in the front. These are important when treating a thrower, just to look at static and dynamic positions, and then you can address those things. That's what's fun as a therapist, seeing something, an abnormality, and like trying to figure out, how can I get that better? So yeah, it's been fun. I'm glad you asked me to do this.
Amazing. I could talk to you all day long about
Yeah,
this.
no,
You're just like,
it's
you
awesome.
radiate this energy that is contagious. So I appreciate it.
All right, bud.
All
Thanks
right.
for everything. I appreciate it.
Steve, where can people find you? Where are you treating patients?
I'm in Hartford County in the Bel Air area. So I'm at it's not the athletic, after today, it's not the athletic club anymore. So Copper Mine is taking over that building. So we're fortunate we can stay in there at 658 Bolton Street in Bel Air. And the phone number is 410-638-9400.
Thank you, Steve, for your time.
All right. All right, bud. Take care, Beck.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Let's Get Physical Therapy podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram at MedStar Health PT. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating and leave a review so we can reach more listeners just like you. As always, we appreciate your time and hope you join us for our next episode.